They thought she couldn't understand a single word. Two powerful men, running an $800 million deal, laughed across the table, calling her a silent doll and a bonsai tree. But what they didn't know was that silence was her weapon, and the most unexpected person in the room was about to turn the entire negotiation upside down. This wasn't just another dinner in San Francisco's richest rooftop restaurant. It was the night Arrogance met its match. The night a young black waitress, invisible to everyone around her, stepped out of the shadows and exposed a truth so devastating, it destroyed 2 careers, saved a legacy, and proved that silence is never weakness. Stay with me, because once you hear how it all unfolded, you'll never look at a quiet room the same way again. The city lights of San Francisco glittered like scattered diamonds, reflecting off the glass walls of one of the most exclusive rooftop restaurants in the world. Inside, the air was thick with quiet power. The kind of place where deals worth hundreds of millions are sealed with a smile over wine. At the center table sat 2 men who thought they owned the night. Derek Caldwell and Trent Langley, biotech executives with reputations as sharp as their tailored suits. They weren't just here for dinner, they were here to close a deal that could reshape global medicine, an $800 million partnership with a Japanese tech empire. Every detail of the room spoke of wealth, the polished silverware, the hushed service, even the way the waiters floated in and out like ghosts. But beneath the elegance was tension, invisible to the eye. Because while the contracts were ready, the outcome depended on one woman, Kimiko Hayashi, Japan's most mysterious billionaire. She sat across from them, calm and silent, her presence as still as a mountain. And already, Derek and Trent were growing restless. Kimiko Hayashi wasn't like the women Derek and Trent were used to dealing with. She didn't laugh at their jokes, didn't nod to fill the silence, didn't rush to please them. Instead, she simply watched, her dark eyes steady, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if the entire multi-million-dollar negotiation was nothing more than a passing breeze. Her silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was deliberate. But the 2 executives didn't see it that way. To them, it was weakness. Derek leaned back in his chair, smirking as he whispered to Trent that Kimiko was nothing more than a ceremonial figurehead, a relic kept around for tradition, not power. The truth was the opposite. Kimiko Hayashi had built her empire through restraint, through patience, through the kind of listening that revealed far more than reckless talk ever could. But Derek and Trent weren't listening. They were convinced that the quiet woman before them was nothing but an obstacle they could push aside with arrogance and charm. What they didn't know was that every word, every smirk, every insult, they were all being absorbed. Not by Kimiko, but by someone they didn't even realize was paying attention. She moved between tables with the kind of grace that made her invisible. To Derek and Trent, she was nothing more than a waitress, someone to refill their glasses, clear their plates, and vanish into the background. Her name was Naomi Brooks. 24 years old. Sharp-minded, soft-spoken, and working double shifts just to keep her head above water. To the executives at the table, she was background noise. To Kimiko Hayashi, she was an unnoticed ally. What no one in that glittering room realized was that Naomi wasn't just another server. She had grown up in Japan. Her father had served in the U.S. military, her mother taught at a Tokyo school. By the time Naomi was 10, she could switch between English and Japanese without missing a beat. So while Derek and Trent leaned across the table, whispering insults and laughing at the quiet doll who sat before them, Naomi heard every single word. Every jab. Every racist remark. Every smug chuckle. They thought their words had vanished into thin air. Instead, they had landed in the mind of the one person who would soon change the entire night. The more Kimiko sat in silence, the bolder Derek and Trent became. Their voices dropped to hushed tones, but their arrogance filled the room like smoke. "She's like a bonsai tree," Trent muttered, swirling his wine. "Decorative. Trimmed to look pretty. But useless when it comes to real power." Derek chuckled, leaning closer. "Give it time. Her empire will be ours before she even realizes what she signed. All we need is her signature, and the rest is just paperwork." Naomi froze, gripping the edge of her tray so tightly her knuckles whitened. She wasn't just hearing words, she was hearing the dismantling of Kimiko's life's work. Kimiko, however, remained perfectly still. Her face revealed nothing, her lips curved in the faintest of smiles. She looked fragile to the men across from her, but Naomi could sense it, this was not fragility. It was endurance. Yet the insults didn't stop. The executives laughed louder, their tone sharper, their words dripping with disrespect. They had no idea their every syllable was being understood by both women sitting across from them, and that their arrogance had already sealed their fate. The tension at the table had reached its peak when Kimiko finally moved. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, her calm voice breaking through the hum of clinking glasses around them. "Is there no one here," she whispered in perfect Japanese, "who truly sees me?" For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the room. Derek and Trent exchanged confused glances. They hadn't understood a single word. To them, it was just gibberish. But to Naomi, it was a call. A call she could no longer ignore. She set down her tray, took a step closer, and then, without hesitation, bowed deeply before Kimiko. The room seemed to freeze. When Naomi lifted her head, the words poured out of her mouth in flawless Japanese. "Forgive me, Hayashi-sama," she said. "But I see you. And I hear everything they have said." The air shifted instantly. Derek's smirk faltered. Trent's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Because in that moment, the invisible waitress they hadn't noticed all evening revealed herself as the one person who understood everything, and who held the power to expose them. Naomi's voice didn't waver. Calm, steady, and precise, she spoke in Japanese, translating the executive's every insult back to Kimiko. The men's smug grins melted into disbelief. Then Naomi did something even more devastating. She reached for the contract Derek had smugly slid across the table. Her eyes scanned the fine print, and with the sharpness of someone who had seen this trick before, she pointed to a single clause buried in the legal jargon. "This," she said firmly, switching back to English so there would be no misunderstanding, "gives your company the right to dismantle Hayashi Technologies, piece by piece, within 5 years. It erases her family's name. It reduces her legacy to nothing." The room went silent. Kimiko didn't move, but her faint smile returned, this time with meaning. Derek and Trent's faces tightened. They hadn't expected the waitress to not only translate but to understand the trap they had built into the contract. Naomi looked directly at them, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You thought she wouldn't see it. You thought she couldn't hear you. But I did. And now, so does she." Their trap had been revealed, and the walls of their empire had just begun to crack. Just when Derek and Trent thought the humiliation couldn't get any worse, a quiet shuffle broke the tension. From behind Kimiko, her assistant placed a sleek recorder on the polished table and pressed play. The executives' own voices filled the air, mocking, laughing, tearing Kimiko down word by word. Every cruel joke, every sneer, every racist remark came alive in surround sound. There was no denying it, no twisting it, no escape. Naomi stood tall, translating each phrase with devastating clarity. Every time their voices dripped with arrogance, she cut through with steady Japanese, making sure Kimiko heard the full weight of their betrayal. The restaurant fell into complete silence. Even the clinking of silverware in the distance stopped, as if the entire rooftop was holding its breath. Derek's face went pale. Trent's jaw tightened, his bravado slipping into raw panic. They weren't negotiating anymore, they were exposed. And across the table, Kimiko finally spoke in English, her voice as sharp as steel. "Now everyone sees who you truly are." The men had walked into dinner believing they were predators. By the time the recording ended, it was clear, they were prey. The recorder clicked off, and for a moment, the room sat in stunned silence. Naomi's chest rose and fell, her hands trembling just slightly, but her eyes were steady. She had risked everything by stepping forward. And then it happened. Her manager stormed across the floor, face red with fury. "You're done here," he hissed. "You don't speak to customers that way. You're fired." The words hit like a hammer. Naomi's apron suddenly felt heavier, her job slipping away in front of the city's most powerful elites. Derek and Trent smirked through their humiliation, thinking at least one person would pay the price tonight. But before Naomi could even remove her apron, another voice cut through the air. Calm. Confident. Unshakable. It was Mai Jones, executive director for Hayashi Technologies, who had been silently watching the entire exchange. She rose from her seat, her gaze fixed on Naomi. This woman, Mai declared, has more integrity, courage, and intelligence than the men who came here to bargain with us tonight. Effective immediately, she will not serve tables. She will serve as part of Hayashi's global strategy team. And her education? Paid in full. Naomi froze, her heart pounding. One moment she had nothing. The next, she was being offered the kind of future she had only dreamed about. And Derek and Trent? Their smirks vanished. Because the waitress they had dismissed as invisible had just been elevated to a seat they could never touch. By the next morning, Derek Caldwell and Trent Langley were finished. News of the disastrous dinner spread faster than wildfire. The leaked recording, every cruel insult, every mocking laugh, circulated online, tearing apart the reputations they had spent decades building. Investors pulled out within hours. Their board called an emergency meeting. By the end of the week, both men had been forced to resign in disgrace, their names dragged across headlines worldwide. Meanwhile, the story of Naomi Brooks and Kamiko Hayashi became a symbol. Social media lit up with praise for the silent billionaire who used patience as her sword, and for the young waitress who dared to speak when silence no longer served. People called it poetic justice, two arrogant executives stripped of their power by the very voices they tried to silence. And the woman they mocked as invisible? She was now standing beside one of the most powerful business empires in the world, no longer unseen, no longer unheard. For Kamiko, it wasn't just about saving her legacy. It was about proving a point. Silence can be strength, but when the moment comes to speak, words can shatter empires. That night wasn't just about a failed deal or a shocking reversal. It was about the power of presence, the danger of arrogance, and the truth that no one is ever truly invisible. Derek and Trent believed their wealth and titles made them untouchable. They saw Kamiko's silence as weakness and Naomi's apron as insignificance. But both women proved them wrong. One used patience to outlast them. The other used courage to expose them. In the end, the executives lost everything, not because of numbers on a contract, but because of words they thought no one could hear. Words that came back to destroy them. And Naomi? She walked into work that night as a waitress. She walked out as a global executive in the making. So the next time you see someone you think is quiet, small, or invisible, remember this story. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it means the storm hasn't spoken yet. And when it does, it changes everything.